third launch of the 2021 annual report for Dublin Rape Crisis Centre in person, with a lot of colleagues and friends also tuning in online. Minister, friends, so many people who are important to this organisation are here this afternoon and are tuning in as well. And we are so grateful to you all for coming along. We are, first of all, I have to do the housekeeping. So this is the bit where I should have checked where the exits and entrances were. I shouldn't have before. It doesn't bother you people on Zoom, but I see one exit there, and I think there's one behind us as well. I'd never make it onto Ryanair. I can for certain sure. So we're going to the purpose of this is to ask Minister Foley to launch our annual report. And what we're going to do is I'm first of all going to ask our wonderful chairperson, Anne-Marie Gill, to say a few words. Then she will introduce the minister, and then we will have snapshots from our work in 2021, coming from various parts of our organisation. And that will be then the report launched, to the great relief of our head of communications, Eoghan Woods over there, and her trusty ally Grania. So just to say, I will come back to who the various staff are at this stage, but Anne-Marie Gill has been chairperson of Dublin Rape Crisis Centre for a number of years. She is indefatigable. I didn't know where to get that out in the right order, but she is and has led the organisation a long way and has steered us well and with calm and with vision for what we should be doing. I will ask Anne-Marie to come up and speak, but first of all, to just mention, I don't think I have to say this, but Minister Foley, Grania took away my real note because she didn't want my name showing up on the phone. Minister Foley is the Minister for Education. She is also an elected to represent the Carrig constituency in the 2020 general election, in that very difficult election. Previously a member of Carrig County Council for the Tralee area, serving from 1994 there until her election to the Dáil in 2020, and served as a member of Tralee Urban District Council. As a member of government and as part of the government that has introduced a new national strategy to combat domestic, sexual and gender-based violence. On the 18th of July last, Minister Foley welcomed the opening by the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment of a consultation on a draft SPHE, social, personal and health education curriculum, including relationships and sexuality education for junior cycle in post-primary schools. In that context, we are very grateful to her for her agreement to be here with us today. Anne-Marie, I will ask you at this stage, perhaps if you could take the floor to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Noli. I'm not as skilled as Noli now at public speaking. I think I'm better behind the scenes, but let me tell you a little bit about what's happening or what has happened. First of all, thank you, Minister, for taking your time today to come here. You have a very busy schedule and we appreciate your being here to launch the 2021 annual report. We welcome you here because education is such an important portfolio and has been and continues to be a real focus of the work of DRCC. It's also critical for the underpinning of our new major national consent programme, as well as for our ongoing awareness raising work that we do in the centres and our education projects. In relation to 2021, it was a particularly difficult and challenging year for all organisations, but in particular for DRCC. COVID forced organisations to reconsider how they operated and how they delivered services, and DRCC was equally challenged. 14,000 contacts to the National 24-hour helpline were received and responded to by our staff and volunteers. And almost 8,500 were supported by our great team of therapists during the same year. Despite these challenging numbers, staff and volunteers ensured that the needs of our clients, those survivors of rape and sexual assault, and welcome to those of you who are here, that they ensured that their needs were a priority and that the staff throughout the year responded magnificently to their calls. I'd just like to say that the DRCC has two main challenges. One is to heal the trauma of rape and sexual violence. And also the second one is to prevent it from happening in the first instance. And we have a major focus on that at the moment, because I think until we can reduce the occurrence, our numbers are going to continue to grow. Rape and sexual violence continues to increase. And also we notice there's an increase also in the violence associated with it. Over the past 3 years, we've invested heavily in research, funded by the Department of Justice and the Community Foundation of Ireland and other donors, into the attitudes, the beliefs and the behaviours around sexual consent in Irish society. Now, the research showed us that about 70% of Irish people believe that we've a problem in relation to consent. And this tells us that we need a sea change in our attitudes in order to make Ireland a safer society with a zero tolerance for sexual violence. This research has underpinned our development, particularly in the last year or two, in relation to the investment in the long-term national project. This consent project aims to inform, educate, and engage the public on consent, which we hope will result in a society where consent is understood and valued, and where sexual relationships are based on respect, on open communications, on trust, and on an open power balance, where people have the ability to refuse or change their mind at any time without any negative repercussions. This major shift requires a societal change, a cultural change. And Irish society has faced these changes in the past, similar behavioural changes in the past, where we have successfully achieved for example, wearing of seatbelts. Up to a particular point, nobody bothered, or only a percentage bothered to wear seatbelts. The very successful No Smoking in Public Places campaign, and the ban on drink driving, which is anathema to most drivers now at this point in time. This consent project requires leadership and education at all levels of Irish society and all sectors, across all communities, working together to achieve this change. We are not going to do it alone. The DRCC will throw a net over it, will create the collaboration, but it will require cross-collaboration to make it happen. We also are engaging with our key stakeholders to make it happen. For example, the Garda Síochána have adopted a hands-on approach to issues related to sexual violence. The judiciary are investing heavily in training, and legislation has and is changing to ensure that survivors are not re-traumatized through the judicial process. It was incredibly positive for our DRCC, and I'm sure a lot of other organisations, to see the publication by the Department of Justice there over the summertime of the third national strategy on domestic, sexual and gender-based violence. This is followed by a tight operational programme and an approved budget, which means it's going to happen. And a significant piece of work, when delivered, will support a much safer Ireland. The education of our young people is key to ensuring that this change is embedded in society. Much is being done in relation to education of our young people. I hear it from my grandchildren, but more, absolutely more needs to be done. I want to welcome and thank Minister Norma Foley for coming here today to launch the annual report. Her presence is a measure of the seriousness with which the Minister and her department are taking this whole area of relationship and sex education for our young people, which can only underpin a safer Ireland, free of rape and of sexual violence. On behalf of my fellow board members, I'd like very much to congratulate our great Chief Executive, Noeline Blackwood, as ever, for her great work with her great team and volunteers, and the hard work and commitment that ensued during 2021 particularly. The DRCC operated flawlessly with great consideration for the clients and putting them at the centre of everything that they did, and also for the 24-hour helpline during that year. A huge thanks to TUSLA, who ensured that we had additional funding in 2021 to keep the centre open and available for our clients. Also to the Department of Justice, and particularly to the Minister for her commitment to ensuring funding was forthcoming for the critical consent campaign. I'd also like to thank my fellow board members. Without them, we would be lacking in expertise and in direction, and I thank them for their commitment and their time. Finally, thank all of you for coming here today, and hopefully you'll take away some thoughts on consent and spread the message and the word, and hopefully working with us collaboratively, we can get somewhere. Now I'd like to invite the Minister, Norma Foley TD, to come and launch the annual report. Thank you.
Is an over maar dacht gaan zo nog gewoon hoogte. Agus wel maar dus naar weg te gaan. Als een Cleary, agus is op een ama, agus een desha of hortum. Van boelen, agus kan daar even jou. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a very great pleasure for me as Minister for Education to be invited here this afternoon on the occasion of the launch of the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre 2021 annual report. I would in particular like to thank your CEO, Nolene, an equally indefatigable woman, and the entire team at the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre for the kind invitation and the generous invitation to me as Minister for Education to be with you here on what is a hugely important occasion. I would also significantly like to take the opportunity to thank each and every member of the Rape Crisis Centre for the work that you continue to do in listening to, supporting and affirming survivors and victims of sexual assault and violence. I really do know that each one of us would wish that it were otherwise, but this work remains necessary, and I sincerely thank each one of you for your tireless dedication to it. I know that many of those who work with the Rape Crisis Centre, whether on your helpline or in fundraising activities, do so on a voluntary basis, undertaking work that can be deeply challenging and very demanding. The values of the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre are trustworthiness, empowerment, respect, and indeed empathy. Values which you live and embody by your actions and support for individuals who have experienced sexual violence. This report today highlights so many aspects of the work which the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre undertakes. I note that the annual 2021 report shows an increase in the number of contacts to your national helpline, and that you have further expanded your services to include a new facility to provide for interpretation in more than 200 different languages. Of course, ultimately, each one of us here today would wish for a world in which the incidence of sexual violence is both diminished and, we would hope, eliminated. I know that in 2021, the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre undertook significant action to make this the case, whether through the training and education services offered by the centre, efforts to build greater recognition in the law on the role of consent, and building awareness of our society of the harm of sexual violence. This ambition is absolutely shared by all across government. Many of us here today will be familiar with the government's third national strategy on domestic sexual and gender-based violence, which has been led by Minister Helen McEntee and is a whole of government approach to ensure that there is simply a zero tolerance of any form of domestic, sexual or gender-based violence. As Minister for Education, I have been working on developing a number of education actions under this specific strategy. I firmly and passionately believe that education is one of the most powerful tools which we as a society have to enact social change. It reaches into every community in our country, and it touches either directly or indirectly every single member of our society. It is where we learn so much about the world around us, and where we learn so much about engaging and how to engage with each other. This is both a power and a responsibility, which I and the broader education system take very seriously. And I would, with your indulgence, like to highlight some of the reforms and work which we are currently undertaking to best fulfill this responsibility. One of the key actions is the redevelopment of social, personal and health education and relationships and sexuality education curriculum. Access to sexual and health education is an important right for students. Social, personal and health education, or SPHE, is a mandatory curriculum subject in all primary schools and in post-primary junior cycle. RSE, or relationships and sexuality education, is required at all levels, from primary right through to senior cycle. However, a review of the existent curricula by the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment found areas that would require improvement within the curriculum. In brief, this review found that the current provision could be characterised as too biological in focus, and that provision could at times be uneven. To address these issues, we have asked the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment to develop new curricula for students in junior cycle, senior cycle and primary school. A draft revised junior cycle specification for SPHE and RSE was published by the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment in July for public consultation. This consultation will continue until the 18th of October, and I would take the opportunity once again to encourage people to engage with that process. I think it is so important that we have the widest possible engagement and consideration of all that we're trying to achieve in education. I firmly believe that when we work as a collective, we can achieve great things, and the collective can only and will only be powerful when everyone is prepared to engage in it. So again, I would give a shout out to the 18th of October and invite as many people as possible to engage with the process. And again, just to confirm that the final revised specifications then are due to be implemented in our schools for junior cycle in September of 2023. This updated specification places a strong focus on the development of important life skills that young people need growing up in a fast changing and indeed I would say complex world. It recognises the very significant changes which have taken place in young people's lives since the current specification was developed, in everything from the advent of the online world and smartphones to welcome changes in terms of how we as a country understand consent, gender identity and sexual identity. It is grounded and absolutely grounded in an approach that is positive, holistic, student-centred, inclusive and age and developmentally appropriate. We are now entering the last fortnight, as I've said, and again, I would ask each one of you to be part of the process. I firmly believe that no one person holds the entire wisdom on any topic, including on this one. And it is important, as I've said previously, that the broadest range of opinions would be heard, would be shared, and indeed learned from. At this point, I would particularly like to recognise and salute the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment and their work. And in particular, I would like to acknowledge and absolutely both celebrate and support the Centre for your sharing of your thoughts, your views and your experiences, which is very important as part of this consultative process. Preparation to update the senior cycle RSE-SPHE specification has already commenced. A background paper and brief has been prepared, which will guide the work of the NCCA development group for the senior cycle RSE-SPHE specification. That background paper was published this week for public consultation, and it is anticipated the senior cycle draft specification itself will be available for public consultation by next summer, and then finalised early 24 with a view to being implemented in schools in September of 24. For primary schools, the primary curriculum framework is due to be published in 23. And once this has happened, again, the NCCA will establish the development group for the curricular area of wellbeing in primary schools. Learning about RSE in primary school will be addressed within the wellbeing area, the subjects of physical and health education and social, personal and values education. This development group will work on the development of a specification for wellbeing and these related subjects. As with post-primary, of course, the aim is learning that is age and stage appropriate, and specifications are developed through research, deliberation, consultation and engagement with networks. We do recognise that many are eager to commence teaching of RSE and SPHE in line with the findings of our review. And so while new specifications are being developed, online toolkits for both primary and post-primary teachers have been established. These toolkits include materials which support teaching about rights and responsibilities in relationships, recognising healthy, unhealthy and abusive relationships, interacting safely and respectfully, both online and face-to-face, and understanding the influence of media, including pornography, on young people's understanding and expectations, sexual consent, and assertive communication. The toolkit also provides practical help designed to deepen teachers' understanding and skills so that they may feel more confident in addressing important and sensitive topics. And I know that the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre have their Body Right and Let's Get Real resources contained within these toolkits, helping them to reach as wide an audience as possible. And I do thank you most sincerely for sharing those resources with the department and with our staff. Furthermore, as a teacher, I know that teachers themselves must be confident and well equipped to teach their students. For this reason, I announced a new postgraduate programme to upskill registered post-primary teachers teaching SPHE and RSE. Schools and teachers will be supported to access the upskilling programme, and course fees will be covered by department funding. This programme will provide a pathway for progression for post-primary teachers interested in developing their skills in teaching SPHE and RSE, and in so doing, importantly build capacity and leadership within the teaching profession in relation to the teaching of SPHE and RSE. The tendering process for this programme is now well advanced, and it is planned that the programme will begin in a short few months in early 23. As I begin to conclude, I would like to draw to mind the words of Helen Keller, who once remarked, "Alone, we can do so little. Together, we can do so much." A succinct phrase, but one which I believe superbly captures the weight and power of the collective to effect change, and indeed to effect important and oftentimes long overdue change in society. Recognising the wisdom and power of the collective is what, to my mind, makes an organisation and indeed an institution like the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre so valuable, for it offers a space for a community to come together, to share in healing and in creating change. Thank you to each one of you involved for your immense commitment to justice and to creating a better and safer world for all of us. As Minister for Education, I look forward to continuing to work with you and with others across the sector to continue to effect the changes that we each wish and indeed need to see across our society.
Thanks a million, Minister. That collaborative approach has been very important, and I know that Katrina, who will speak later, will talk about how valuable it has been to work with the NCCA in relation to resources. And we also find that the collaboration is very important, but we hope we won't be so collaborative that we forget to be a stone in the shoe of government departments, because every single year that passes without this makes our hearts sink, because there's another class that has started that won't hear what needs to be heard, that will leave school without knowing what they need to know. So we will continue to be really impatient for the change. Sorry about that. I mean, you're doing your level best, and certainly that was a resounding call. And I hope we tweeted it out for everyone to be part of that consultation by the 18th of October. I think one of the things we've noticed recently is People are, that question of the collective, it's hard to talk on your own. It's hard to speak up about things if you're a single teacher, and we'll hear from a teacher shortly on this. It's hard to be the parent that speaks out about the lack of emotional formation that their children are getting. But if we can pull it all together, if we can identify, it takes all of the work that we do and that others do. And I see the Chairperson of Women's Aid, Alva Smith, down there in the back, who's well known across very many ways. We work so closely with so many other organizations in the domestic, sexual and gender-based violence sector. We work with government, we work with others outside, because when I look at our services in this annual report, you see how we are working across the justice system, supporting people who are going to the Gardaí or going to court, who at the far end of court want to say that they are survivors of sexual violence and find it hard to do it. We work in the health system, where we consider ourselves a vital mental health resource and an expert one dealing with domestic, sexual and gender-based violence. And we work in the education sector, as we've spoken about a bit, and we'll speak about it a bit again in the future. It takes all of that recognition that people who experience sexual violence and people who want to prevent it are right across our society, because sexual violence is right across our society, and it is going to take all of us combined. I also see a former long-term director of Dublin Aid Crisis Centre, Olive Braden, in the audience here. Delighted you're here, Olive. But just to recognise, we have been at this for over 40 years. And we can't keep going at the pace we had to go along the way. Who our greatest allies in this are those who have experienced violence and have had enough and are impatient. They are young people who have had enough and are impatient, but between us all, we can see that we are making some progress, and we will continue to work at it. Now, to just give you a snapshot of some of our work, I'm first of all going to invite Katrina Frere, who's our education and training. I'm actually going to name you all, like, just for the flow of it, so just stay where you are for a second. Katrina is our education and training manager and has been the central link with the NCCA minister over time. And then Eoghan Cleary, a secondary school teacher, on his experience. And Eoghan has been an inspiration to us, really, in the centre, demanding we do more than we were doing all along the way. So just want to thank you for that, even if we did if we weren't fast enough for you. So we hopefully we'll hear from your impression, even of what the minister was talking about there and the need for it. And we will also have Angela McCarthy, our head of clinical services, to talk about our health services, our therapy services, counselling on the helpline, and our other supports. And then Celine Newman, in the accompaniment service, where our work actually expanded enormously in 2021. Poor old Celine, she came into a smaller job and she ended up kind of going at the end of the year, what? We had double the number of people I was expecting to see along the way. But that again was where Justice actually recognised the need to fund support for victims of sexual violence by people who are expert in the area. So I'm going to invite them to come up in that order. So Katrina, I think you're going to lead off. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and Minister, Ambassador, and all our colleagues across the different sectors and friends. We're glad to know, Minister, that we're working on the submission. We're nearly there, as we have done in every submission that we've been asked to in our over the last few years as well, as we do in all areas of our work. But just to tell you a little bit about the Education and Training Department, we provide support, training, consultation to those who support survivors of sexual violence in the line of their work. So we do this in 2021, we had a lot of training with loads of different groups. We have done training with different arms of the justice system, to those in colleges, to the porters of asylum seekers and refugees, to those in other NGOs and charities, to the arts sector, and many, many more as well. So it's a huge focus of our work, that training. Our training is informed by the work of DRCC, and so that means that at every approach we're trauma informed and we have trauma at the focus and the survivor at the focus. And it's really relevant. That point is really relevant to the work that we do and our prevention of sexual violence to our youth programs work. And since 2007, which is a long time ago, we've been delivering the Body Right program to those who work with young people in and out of schools. And the program covers getting young people to understand about healthy and unhealthy relationships, about consent, about the impact of online world and the dangers of online safety. And this work also focuses on preparing the teacher and youth worker by giving them the knowledge and skills to deliver the program in a safe and trauma-informed way. So it's a delight to hear about that training that's coming up for teachers as well. Because as well as giving them the resources that we've done with the NCCA and we've collaborated with, and I think it's really important that they get to engage with the issues, you know, in a training as well. So just to mention that the demands of the training for youth programs has never been bigger, really. You know, we're inundated with requests from teachers and others to help them facilitate conversations on healthy relationships and enable them to navigate the online world. They're seeing firsthand what it means really for not to have these conversations, and the result is problematic messages that young people are receiving about body image, about power, about sexual relationships and behaviours. So the result, this is also evident really from the regular calls to our helpline that our colleagues in the helpline hear from parents who are looking for support on their young people that are harmed or impacted by these various issues. So the need for porn and media literacy has been really evident for some time for young people. And as a result of some funding from philanthropy and the Department of Justice, in 2019, in response to this need, we developed the Let's Get Real program. And that gives people that train with us the resources, the support and the activities to give young people so that they're to give them the ideas of how to be consumers, critical consumers of the content that they're engaging with. So they're actually able to understand the potential impact and engage with that. Since it was launched, we've been fully booked on every training, which happens a number of times throughout the year. So we know the demand is there and it's really huge. Our only recent research on consent, as well as research by the National Youth Council of Ireland, tells us that young people are looking to schools to learn about healthy relationships and consent and the impact of pornography as well. Our own youth advisory group, which was formed in 2020, have been talking to us about the really crazy need for this to happen as soon as possible for young people in schools as well. So I'm nearly there, and I'm going to introduce you then to Eoghan. For us to move towards a society where sexual violence is eradicated, we need this comprehensive education in schools that has all these elements involved. And we need it to be across the board for every young person in Ireland. It's just vitally important. I now want to introduce you to one of the fantastic teachers who's been delivering our programs for the last number of years in his school. Cleary's passion and drive for educating young people in this area is really clear. So you'd be delighted to hear from him. And I want to invite him now to talk to you about what engaging in these programs means for young people and what more he thinks is needed.
Thank you. Hi everybody, Mr. Foley. My name is Eoghan Cleary. As Katrina said, I'm an English and drama teacher at Temple Carrig Secondary School, where I also coordinate the SPHE and Wellbeing curriculum and teach it. 5 years ago, I devised a gender studies program in transition year in response to an apparent lack of understanding by the student body with regard to consent, misogyny, and toxic masculinity that was resulting in both male and female students experiencing regrettable and unwanted sexual interactions. The program enabled students to explore the social conditioning they had undergone in life due to their gender with regard to personality, behaviour, education, careers, relationships, and sex. When it came to sex, what the students assumed was expected of them because of their gender was so obviously and universally influenced by porn that I immediately redeveloped the program to be one focused on porn literacy. I contacted Nolene and Katrina here at the DRCC, who facilitated my training in the Body Right program and who are at the same time developing what is now the Let's Get Real media and porn literacy module. Since implementing both of these programs, the culture of our school has been slowly but steadily affected by them. Due to the Body Right program, our students from third year on are fluent in their understanding of consent, how to ask for it, how to give it, how to withhold it, what the law says about it, and how to practically figure out what they are comfortable consenting to, as well as being able to support someone who has experienced an unwanted sexual interaction. The Body Right program has also facilitated multiple students realizing that they have been either the victim or the perpetrator of sexual violence, and has provided them the space to share those realizations with a professional adult in a supported manner. This year, having only been back to school for 6 weeks, I've already had 2 disclosures by students needing support with regard to sexual violence that they have either experienced in the past or were still experiencing at the time. The culture created in the Body Right classroom has fed into discussions in other classrooms, into the corridors at lunchtime, into the social lives of the students outside of the school, and even into our own staff room and the lives of our teachers and their families. It has even informed our current whole school initiative to examine our unconscious gender biases and eradicate any behaviour by both students and staff that might reinforce gender stereotyping within the provision of education in our school. When it comes to the porn literacy module, let's get real. As soon as the students realise that they can openly talk about sex and their expectations of it, which they openly report being almost entirely based on their consumption of porn and sexually explicit online content, there is absolutely no stopping them. In our school, more than half of our students reported actively using porn, a quarter of our male students using it more than once a day. And let's be clear, they are not passively watching it. They are actively using it. Our male students generally for sexual stimulation, our female students, some also for sexual stimulation, but most for education. And those who use it report that they rely on it to know what they are expected to do in a sexual interaction and how they are expected to do it. And just a note on this, current porn trends are not the tame images that we were exposed to in our pre-internet childhood days. Our students currently have 24-hour access on the bus, in their classrooms, in their bedrooms, in their beds, to the most violent, degrading, and misogynistic video content available in the world. And the porn industry has been responding to their presence in the market for at least a generation. 10 years ago, for the first time in history, over half the world's adolescent population had become smartphone owners. And since then, the most popular search for terms on porn-providing websites has shifted dramatically to include a whole range of teen-related searches, almost always appearing within the top 5 terms searched for in any given year. And the impact the porn industry is having on our students is real. The science is all there, the research is done. Exposure to porn changes the neuroplasticity of the brain, it reworks the mechanisms of your mind, and it dictates what it is you will be sexually aroused by, and it's addictive. My TY students know all about this because it is a core component of the Let's Get Real module. But their expectations of how they are meant to act and behave in sexual encounters is so skewed. I have a very detailed list of the expectations that they have fed back to me, many of them based on the boys' belief that they are expected to demonstrate dominance and the girls' understanding that they are meant to behave in a submissive and compliant manner. The specifics of this list would be shocking to most of you, as the negative focus on unhealthy, extremely violent, and toxic, harmful attitudes and behaviors is undeniable. This can be very difficult to hear as a teacher working with young people, but it is an essential space to create in order for our students to critically reflect on what they have been taught and whether or not it is in their best interests. And it's then that the negative consequences of our students' sexual conditioning by the porn industry suddenly becomes abundantly clear to them, because it's impossible for it not to. But without these programs, there is nothing to challenge these expectations currently. I've been delivering the Body Right program to third years and the Let's Get Real program to transition years for the last 4 years, and the response from the students is always the same. It's generally one of shock and anger. They are shocked that this is the first time they are being taught about something so vitally important to their well-being, and they are angry that no one has protected them and their sexual conditioning throughout their childhood. And they all say the same thing to me: deliver the programs earlier. And when I explain to them that the content of the programs is not deemed appropriate to be appropriate for younger students, they get even angrier, pointing out that if the people who made those decisions really cared about access to age-appropriate content, children would not be allowed to own smartphones. 2 decades ago, when I was 16, the internet made porn a secondary school problem in Ireland, and no one taught us about it. No one even talked about it. Smartphones have made porn a primary school problem. And I cannot be clear on this. We need to talk about it and we need to teach them about it. In my own school, 36% of students reported being exposed to porn for the first time in primary school, 67% by the time they sat their junior cert, and 98% by the time they reached 6th year. And that was 5 years ago. In 2019, 97% of 13-year-olds in Ireland owned a smartphone, first years. In the same year, smartphone ownership and all the unfettered access to the internet that comes with it had reached 34% for 8-year-olds in Ireland. That's children of second class. And the impact of this is clear too. As soon as one child with a smartphone enters a primary school classroom, it isn't long before students in that classroom begin to be exposed to sexually explicit content. And it is not because they seek it out. 100% of first-time child exposures to porn are never as a result of them looking for it. It's forced upon them by algorithms designed to target both adolescent smartphone users as well as younger children with access to the same apps and social media platforms before they even naturally consider themselves as sexual beings. I know this because my students tell me. The bottom line is this: these programs need to be embedded in the national curriculum and be delivered by teachers trained to support their students through this process of essential critical reflection. But even with the likes of Body Right and Let's Get Real, which are invaluable, essential, reactive measures to the needs of this generation of young Irish students, they will not on their own prevent future generations of children being exposed to the same sexual conditioning throughout their most formative years. For many of them, the porn industry has been engaging them every day, multiple times a day, for almost a decade before they arrive into my classroom. And if we continue to allow primary and secondary school children to access the internet in the unfettered manner that smartphones enable, without any kind of regulation, effective legislation, or at the very least some education about pornography and its effects on their brains and their future sex lives, we are leaving the sexual education as well as the sexual conditioning of the next generation of Irish children in the increasingly violent and misogynistic hands of the porn industry. Thank you all so very much for giving me the time to speak today.
I feel like we should actually just go now at this stage in some ways. That was very powerful. It's nothing, Minister, you haven't heard before. It just, I suppose, goes to highlight how much as well we try to do in the area of gathering the experience of people we work with and we support and translating that into something that is useful for you as a leader to hear, for our policymakers to hear. And hopefully through that, through the experience of survivors, the experience of our experienced therapists and support staff, we will be able to bring about a reality for people who maybe just don't have a voice for themselves so far, like Eoghan, your students didn't, but you have amplified their voice for them. So thank you very much for that. And speaking of our very experienced therapists, I'm going to ask Angela McCarthy if she'd speak just a little bit about the therapy, counselling and similar services. Thank you.
Minister, our Educus, Ambassador and members of the audience, follow that. As a former teacher and guidance counsellor, I must say I'm shocked my core details. But it's fantastic to hear it set out, so we know what we need to do. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of the 2021 statistics in relation to the clinical services of DRCC, comprising both the helpline services and therapy services. And our colleague Celine will follow with the report of the DRCC's accompaniment services. So I'll start with the helpline services, which are managed and developed with tremendous commitment by Michelle Graham, who unfortunately can't be with us, but I have a couple of quotes from Michelle that I'll sprinkle in, with help from our two team leaders, Carmel and Siobhan. In 2021, there were 14,012 contacts to the national 24-hour helpline. 7,900 were first-time contacts, with 3,711 calling back for a second or subsequent call. 81% of contacts were female, 18.7% were male, 0.3% other. A comment from Michelle around the helpline. She said our helpline calls throughout 2021 continued to have themes relating to the ever-increasing pressures of COVID and post-lockdown, returning back to work and daily life, including college and school. This pressure brought its own anxiety and stress for those with past trauma and those who have experienced recent trauma. So the whole thing combining together. The ongoing challenge for helpline counsellors is to meet people who are in a heightened state of crisis and reassure them that they are not alone. So I'm going to sprinkle in a little bit of client feedback as well. These are clients who anonymously gave us feedback, which we seek constantly during the year. So a client commenting on the helpline described it as total understanding, compassion, kindness, and a safe place to be heard. A second service that is now being operated by what we call our telephone team is web chat. The online chat service, which in 2021 operated weekdays from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m, supported 415 contacts via DRCC.ie. The web chat is now operating its standard hours from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. weekdays. So Michelle commented on that by saying, our web chat service continues to be a big success. We have regular users who feel safe and comfortable in this environment, and others who have gone on to avail of our wider support. So it's a starting point for some people to feel safer. It gives us great comfort to know that our callers have options and can avail of our support at their own pace and in their own way. So a third service then of the suite of services that involve the helpline and telephone team is the helpline interpreting service. And this was actually launched in December 2021. This allows people to access helpline support using interpreters in over 200 languages. So again, Michelle commented, we have had very positive outcomes from those who have contacted our helpline interpreting service. This access point for callers who do not speak English has been a crucial addition to our service provision. It has given them a pathway to our accompaniment and therapy services. We have successfully completed calls in Chinese, Spanish, Somali, and Arabic, to name but a few. So it's a safe starting point. It's a good starting point for people where language could be a barrier. So moving on now to the DRCC counselling and therapy services. Due to the impact of COVID, the counselling and therapy services were delivered in diverse ways throughout the year of 2021. Face-to-face where possible, because it's always our preferred option. We make more contact with people, they can see us, we can see them. But like extent of necessity, online and by phone when therapists were working from home due to COVID lockdown, or when clients were unable to attend in person for various reasons. Our outreach services in Tala, Coolock, the Docus Women's Prison and Balbriggan were kept going either remotely or in person, depending on the varying circumstances in relation to COVID lockdowns and precautions. And you all know what that was like. We were in, we were out, we were in, we were out. You couldn't plan for very long. You just had to, do the best you could. So 580 people attended for therapy in 2021. 50 were new. 500, sorry, I was saying there. Almost 50-50 new and ongoing clients. I'm not reading my own writing. Most were female at over 90%. Our therapists delivered 5,314 counselling sessions over the year with a very high take-up rate of 82%. So you might say, why was there such a high take-up rate? Well, people were at home, they were desperate, they were being traumatized in all sorts of different ways, and this was available to them. So, and they were not going anywhere. So and it was very easy for them also to access the service. They didn't have to get a bus or, travel to do so. So we were delighted with that take-up rate because we knew people needed it so badly in 2021. So some feedback from a client, anonymous. In the last 4 months before I finished in therapy, I had become stable, steady, and found a trust in myself. I found my true goodness. I let go of guilt and shame. Many of the 289 new clients who engaged with our therapists for the first time in 2021 had also suffered, as you might expect, other types of violence, such as physical abuse, psychological abuse, or harassment and intimidation. About 4 in 10 of these new clients, 39%, had reported the crimes against them to the Gardaí. Another comment from a client: working with my therapist helped to save my life. She empowered me and supported me. She gave me space to feel all my feelings and grow and heal. The DRCC offered 2 other new clinical services in 2021. One was our Moving Forward from Sexual Violence programme, with team leader Maria Eoghan leading on that. And this had been developed in the UK by KRTS. It offered a blended approach, including online learning and coach-led support to participants seeking to understand and manage trauma symptoms. So a person who had experienced trauma could, take up this online program, and then they would have the help of a therapist as their coach throughout the program as it progressed. So they were learning to understand their trauma, they were filling out exercises, and they were getting help from the therapist as well. So the program had 119 participants in 2021.
Angela, I'm just going to interrupt you very briefly there, just to say that the minister is running over time and has to move to another appointment now. So Angela's nearly done, but we'll excuse you. Just to say thanks a million to you, and also just to say the minister really didn't have time to do this today, but she has squeezed us in along the way, and thank you very much for your time and listening, and we'll be in further touch with you along the way. But your meal man that to us today, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Okay, I'm saying away, I'm just sorry.
I'm really sorry.
And finally, our client support service. Now, this is something that was an ambition about 20 years ago, to have a client support service, kind of like having a social worker that would help your clients when you're doing the therapy, which help them with all the other issues, so many issues that they have, like housing and unemployment and their entitlements and so on. So finally, and I will thank Noeline in a minute, that we got that service put in place in 2021. And it assisted 35 of our clients with practical life issues, thus enabling them to focus better on their own healing. So in other words, you can't be doing therapy if you're distracted about having to get money, or you're going to be thrown out of your flat or whatever. It's hard to do it. There were 199 interventions throughout the year across such areas as housing, homelessness, social welfare, asylum, education and employment. And I'm delighted to say that service with a different person in place is continuing and is being further developed this year. So in conclusion, I would like to thank our CEO, Noeline, for her support and openness to innovation in relation to clinical services throughout 2021. The development of the new services I've outlined has greatly enriched what we can offer all of those who use our services, both the callers on the helpline and the clients. Staff involved in clinical services, along with all our colleagues in the different departments, have pulled together throughout 2021 to fulfil the DRCC's goal, preventing and healing the trauma of sexual violence. Thank you.
Well, wasn't that a rotten thing to do now, to stop her in mid-flow? But it didn't. It didn't interrupt your flow, Angela. Thank you very much for that. And I think it is important to say that it's not in the report because it's hard to explain. But we spent a lot of time as a result of COVID reorganizing our the way we deliver services. We had to, in terms of training, in terms of therapy, we had to go online. But we tried to do more than that because we recognize that if demand is going to continue to increase, we have to have different ways of streamlining services, of building new ways of doing work in order to try to meet need in new ways and ways that will efficiently allow us give people a timely service. And I do want to credit the flexibility of the staff. I will come back to that at the end as well, but their flexibility and their kind of willingness to say, let's see whether it works or not. Let's see if we can make it work along the way, while always keeping those who use our services as safe as possible. So at this stage, not finally, alas, not finally, but Celine is now going to give us a flavour of the justice and complement services. Celine Newman, thank you.
Good afternoon, Ambassador. Together with my colleague Lena and our tremendous volunteers, we provide accompaniment services for the centre. The accompaniment service delivers a number of support options for victims of past and recent rape and sexual assault. in Satu, in Garda stations, and also in court. In Satu, our trained volunteers accompany and support victims to the Satu, which is the sexual assault treatment unit at the Rotunda Hospital. The volunteers meet with the victim before and after victims' appointments with the medical examiner. And in 2021, we accompanied 115 victims of rape and sexual assault. This compares to 85 accompaniments in 2020, when the accompaniment service to Satu was particularly impacted by COVID restrictions. We also offer support, information, and accompaniment to any victim of sexual violence who is considering reporting to the Gardaí or any other body. In 2021, there was a marked increase in the number of victims and survivors contacting the accompaniment service, as contacts nearly doubled from 106 in 2020 to 210 in 2021. 192 of those that we supported were female and 18 were male. There was also an increase of more than 50% in the time spent accompanying those reporting, from 241 hours to 367 hours. In terms of court accompaniment, we've expanded our court accompaniment service, and we now have a dedicated team of 7 court support workers who rotate on a 6 to 8 week roster to accompany those victims and survivors who are going to court as a witness. We also provide support in the courts for their families and their friends. We offer court familiarisation, which victims find is really beneficial as it gives them a sense of how to navigate the court. They'll also be shown the victim support unit where they can go at any time for the period of their trial. Our court services team accompanied 45 survivors to court in 2021, and we saw an increase of 80% in the hours spent accompanying victims in court, from 193 hours in 2020 to 348 hours in 2021. As well as supporting people to the courts of criminal justice, our accompaniment service also supports victims of rape and sexual violence who are going to the family courts, to civil courts, and to workplace relations commissions. All of these supports are so very helpful to victims and survivors who are worried, apprehensive, and very overwhelmed by the thought of taking action and seeking justice. One person told us, "When I think back to having to give evidence, I was feeling panicked and overwhelmed. I couldn't think straight. The DRCC volunteer just brought me through the simple things. I felt safe with her." And to finish on some very positive news, and given that there is such a demand for accompaniment support, we're happy to mention a significant piece of work that we have undertaken and that has been generously funded by the Department of Justice. This online resource, which is targeted at victims and survivors who are seeking information on what they can do following a rape or a sexual assault, where they can get support, covering specialist crisis medical care to the criminal justice process, from reporting to Gardaí through to the courts and beyond. It will be delivered online through the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre website, using content and technology that will engage and empower those who need this information to guide them at their own pace and in their own time. This resource is expected to be delivered in the new year. In particular, it will be for survivors and their supporters and family members, as well as those who will encounter these people in frontline services and educational settings. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks very much, Celine. It's good to see Ambassador Gary Gray here, the Australian ambassador to Ireland. We have learned an awful lot from Australia about how we might be able to bring forward positive messages, better education, and the rest of it. And we really appreciate you being here today and your support for our work in general, Ambassador. So thank you very much for that. And with that, it remains only for me to conclude this event online and in person by saying, first of all, a very big thank you to all of you who came here today and to everybody who has tuned in. A huge thank you to all of those who have made the work that comes up in this report possible. in the course of 2021. Chief amongst those are the personnel of Dublin Rape Crisis Centre. The staff and volunteers are amongst the most committed, dedicated, smart people that you would find anywhere. I have had occasion recently to indicate that that's not always recognised in the remuneration we can give them along the way, but possibly that's for another day. But I don't want to let the occasion go without realising that we have people who are uniquely experienced and who work in very difficult and pressured circumstances a lot of the time, and are ever seeking to improve the way we work, to improve the outcome for those who come to us seeking support. I would also like to, so that's our staff and volunteers, because in particular, our volunteers do it without any pay at all. Those who are working as fundraisers on the helpline, going to the sexual assault treatment unit, helping us in policy work, helping to develop the work of the centre. They are, and some of them are here today. We are really grateful to you, because not only do you do the work, but you're champions for us in the wider community as well. And the other great set of champions we have are those who have experienced sexual violence and who want to see it stop, who want a better world, who want this not to happen to others, and who either when they speak out in public, which is tough, no matter how you look at it, or whether they speak to us and ask us to amplify their voices, or when they challenge us in various ways, including like Eoghan challenged us to do better on our programs over time, whichever way it works. It is the challenge that we get from survivors of sexual violence and the support and the encouragement to go on is what drives us. It particularly is named in our campaign to project a national conversation around consent. We will insist that that is survivor informed, because it is only with the participation of those who are experts by experience that we will make this work along the way. Thank you very much to you. I forget your name. Orla. I was given it, but I forgot it. Orla, thank you very much. She has done an hour of ISL in partnership. And to Anne-Marie, to you and to all our board, I, on behalf of all of the staff and volunteers of Dublin Rape Crisis Centre, and you're all volunteers as well, but all the other volunteers, I want to say a huge thank you to you for your direction to us, for your support, for the way in which you have helped us to be able to produce this report with all the work that is involved in it. Our board is really a very important part of driving our work forward. Our funders, I see Joan Mullen from Tusla here, who's more than a funder. You're a partner, I think, in much of the work we have done over the time, as is the Department of Justice. And I said, oh, that's Derek taking a picture of her. I was wondering what Eoghan was. I'm sure she's trying to get me to finish up, but I have to say that in also our other funders, those who have seen our mad notions sometimes and have invested in them in order to bring them forward. All the corporations who are now whose staff are now saying they want to help us. We're dying to get back to a bucket collection. We haven't done a bucket collection forever, but all the members of the general public who have supported us in our work. And then our colleagues who are here in the room and online, our professional colleagues, others working in the non-governmental sector, others in particular working against domestic, sexual and gender-based violence. But we feel part of that broader sector as well. And we just want to say an enormous thank you to all of you. And finally, I just want to thank Eoghan Woods, our communications and campaigns manager, and Grania Henry, who have really masterminded today. I think that's right, Eoghan. Am I forgetting anyone? I will mention Derek in a minute. Derek is our photographer. So, but lots of people have helped to make this happen, but the boss has been Eoghan, and so thank you very much for all of that. And as we come nearly to the end of 2022, we hope that the work that we're going to be able to do will have more impact, will be able to do more than we were able to in 2021, because the campaign, or the challenge, is really only just becoming visible to us now in all the size of it, and it's going to take us all to make our world one where there is zero tolerance of domestic, sexual and gender-based violence, and where those who experience it get the help that they need in a timely way. Am I done, Emery?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'm done. Thank you all very much for coming along.